Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into something that I know a lot of you are thinking about studying abroad, particularly the appeal and the challenges of heading to a Western university.
Yeah.
And we've got a ton of sources here, news reports, analyses, even some social media chatter.
Mm-hmm.
And it's painting a pretty fascinating picture.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's get ready for some myth busting, some surprising trends, and maybe even some advice you won't find anywhere else. So
Sounds good.
let's dive right in. Anyway, so let's start with the big WHY. For Indian students studying abroad, especially in the West, has always had this sort of allure. It's like
It's the dream, right?
it's the dream.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, it's a dream with deep roots,
Mhm.
You think about those classic Bollywood scenes, right?
Yeah.
Students coming back from these prestigious universities abroad, their degrees, ready to take on the world.
Right. And it's not just the image, it's about the opportunities, right?
Yeah.
The exposure to a global academic scene, a chance to maybe earn more, a whole new way of life. Who wouldn't be tempted?
Exactly.
And his stats back this up, right? Over 1.3 million Indian students are currently studying abroad.
Yeah, it's a really staggering number. It really highlights how powerful this dream has been for Indian families.
Hmm.
But here's where things get a little complicated. The global landscape is changing,
Okay.
and it's making this dream a bit tougher to achieve.
Okay, so you're saying there's some friction, some pushback against this dream.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me more.
Well, we've got economic and social unrest happening in a lot of Western countries, right?
Yeah.
And this is creating tension.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, immigrants, including students,
Yeah.
they often get caught in the middle of that.
Yeah. Is it a case of misplaced blame? Like, what's driving this tension?
It's a complicated issue, but I think there's definitely a sense that immigrants are being scapegoated for some of these economic problems.
Okay.
And this isn't just talk, right? It's leading to real policy changes
Yeah.
that make it harder and more expensive for Indian students to study abroad.
Okay, so we're starting to see a little clear picture here.
Mm-hmm.
But how is this playing out in specific countries? Now, let's start with Canada, a place often seen as welcoming.
Right.
What's happening there?
Well, even Canada is experiencing this shift. Student visa approvals, they've been cut drastically, like about 30 to 40%.
Wow.
And it's not just about the numbers,
What
there's
about-
also a change in the overall atmosphere.
What do you mean? What kind of changes?
Well, there's growing tension with the Khalistani separatists, and there's just, we're seeing more negativity towards Indians on social media.
Yeah.
Imagine you arrive in a country that you think is welcoming, but suddenly things feel different, right?
Yeah.
It can be a little unsettling.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay, so what about the UK? They've always been a really popular destination for Indian students.
Yeah, the UK has actually introduced some pretty big changes to their post-study work visa rules, making it harder for students to stay and work after graduating. Okay. And they've also tightened the restrictions on dependent visas, so it's even more difficult to bring family along.
So even if you get in,
Yeah,
building a life there is getting a lot more difficult.
exactly.
Okay, and then there's Australia.
Australia, yeah. They've taken a bit of a different approach. They're really focusing on financial barriers.
Okay.
So they've doubled their visa fees to 1,600 Australian dollars.
Wow, that's a big increase.
It is. And they've also, closed some loopholes that allowed students to stay and work indefinitely.
Right.
Plus, they've made their English language requirements even tougher.
So they're kind of trying to make it difficult all around.
Yeah, it seems that way.
Okay, so we've got Canada tightening those visa approvals, the UK focusing on those post-study restrictions, and Australia raising the financial stakes.
Right.
What about the USA? It's still a big draw for a lot of students, but is that changing?
Yeah, the U.S. is an interesting case. Indian students contribute a massive amount to the U.S. economy,
Right.
like $14 to $15 billion annually.
Wow, that's huge.
It is. But even with that kind of economic impact, things are getting more complicated.
What do you mean complicated? Like, is it harder to get in?
It's not just about getting in.
Ah.
It's about what happens after you graduate.
Okay.
And we're seeing a worrying trend. More Indian students are actually seeking asylum in the U.S.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that suggests that the traditional path of studying, working, and settling down is becoming a lot less certain.
So why are they seeking asylum? What's driving that?
Well, it's probably tied to anxieties over H-1B visa approvals, right? The H-1B visa is kind of the typical route for skilled workers to stay in the U.S.
Right.
And getting one has always been competitive, but now there's just this growing uncertainty.
Yeah.
And for students who've invested heavily in their education and who have, these massive loan burdens,
Right.
the pressure is just immense.
So it's like you go there, you get this great education,
Yeah.
but then face this massive hurdle in actually staying and working to repay your loans and actually build a future.
It's a tough situation.
Yeah. No wonder there's a rise in asylum seeking.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head.
So we've seen how this dream of studying abroad is facing some headwinds.
Right.
But what's causing this shift?
Right.
Why this kind of sudden backlash? It used to be that Western countries actively encouraged, international students to come and contribute.
Right.
It was a win-win, wasn't it?
It was, They needed to address skills gaps, they needed to boost their economies, and they wanted to attract foreign students.
Yeah.
So, students got access to world-class education. These countries got a talented workforce.
Like Canada, for example.
Yeah.
They contributed, $37 billion, something like that?
Yeah, it's a huge amount.
That's a lot.
To the Canadian economy.
Yeah.
But now the situation is different. The need for foreign talent in some sectors, it seems to be declining.
So it's the economic landscape shifting? Is that what's driving this?
It's definitely a factor. And, it ties into those political shifts that we were talking about, that sense of immigrants being blamed for economic woes.
Yeah.
Well, that's translating into immigration policies. And international students are the ones that are getting caught in the crossfire.
So it's not just economics, it's politics too.
Right.
Are there other things at play here?
Well, there are. For example, some of those smaller, less reputable colleges, they've been exploiting international students.
Okay.
Offering subpar education, making promises they can't keep.
Right.
And that's really created this negative perception.
A few bad apples spoiling it for everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's also, the housing crisis
Right.
in cities like Toronto and Vancouver, where a lot of international students go.
Yeah.
Housing costs have just skyrocketed.
Right.
There's this shortage of affordable options, and people see international students as driving up the demand and displacing locals.
So that's adding to the tension.
Yeah, it is.
So we've got a whole bunch of things here.
Yeah.
Economic anxieties, political shifts, societal tensions,
It's a mix fact.
all kind of contributing to this changing landscape for international students.
Exactly.
So with all these challenges, should students just give up on the dream of studying abroad?
Not at all.
Okay.
It just means they need to be more, I think, strategic,
Yeah.
more informed,
Right.
and much more adaptable.
Okay, that makes sense. So for our listener who's thinking about studying abroad,
Yeah.
what are some practical steps they can take? What advice would you give them?
That's a great question. And that's where I think things get really interesting.
Okay.
In the next part of our deep dive, we're going to explore those pathways and equip our listeners with the knowledge they need to navigate this complex landscape.
All right, sounds good. We'll be right back after a short break.
Great.
All right, so we've talked about all these challenges, but I'm really interested to hear about those pathways to success you mentioned. What can our listener do to make this dream a reality, with all this going on?
Well, one thing that's really clear from our sources is that having in-demand technical skills is more crucial than ever.
So even with all these hurdles, it still boils down to skills.
Absolutely. The world still needs skilled professionals.
Okay.
And that's true globally. We're talking things like data science, machine learning, software development.
Yep.
These fields are just indispensable.
Okay, so it's not just about getting a degree, it's about choosing the right field
Yeah.
and really developing those skills.
Exactly.
What else should our listener be thinking about? Should they still consider those traditional destinations like Canada, the UK, Australia, the US?
I mean, those countries still offer world-class education, but you really need to approach them with a more discerning eye now.
Okay.
Remember those less reputable colleges we talked about?
Right.
Thorough research is absolutely crucial.
So don't just jump at the first opportunity.
Yeah.
Be really selective.
Yeah, and look beyond just the rankings, right?
Okay.
Check those post-graduation employment rates for international students. See what kind of support services the university offers. Research their track record on things like discrimination and racism.
Yeah,
You want to make sure it's a good fit academically and socially.
that makes sense. Yeah. It's not just about getting the degree. It's about finding an environment where you can thrive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And don't forget that, immigration policies are always changing.
Oh, right.
So stay updated.
Keep up with the latest.
Yeah, things can change quickly.
Right.
You don't want to be caught off guard.
Adaptability is key.
Absolutely. And this is where I think things get really interesting.
Okay.
Our sources also suggest thinking outside the box beyond those traditional destinations.
Okay, like where? Tell me more.
Well, Germany, for instance, they have a huge demand for skilled workers, especially in those STEM fields.
Right.
And they're making it easier for Indian students to study and work there. Okay.
Did you know that they issue something like 90,000 skilled Indian worker visas every year?
Wow, they're really opening the doors.
They are.
What about the universities there? Are they comparable to the US or the UK?
Germany has excellent universities.
Okay.
Many with strong reputations in science and technology.
Okay.
Plus, they're actively trying to attract even more Indian students and researchers.
Okay.
They actually have this ambitious goal to become a hub for 50,000 Indian students and researchers.
It's like a whole new frontier opening up.
It is.
What about any other options, any other hidden gems out there?
Well, keep an eye on New Zealand.
Okay.
They're offering more flexible student pathways and post-study work visas.
Okay.
It's a beautiful country, a welcoming culture, and they really want skilled professionals.
Okay, so we've got Germany and New Zealand emerging as strong contenders. Anything else our listeners should keep in mind as they're kind of exploring these options?
Here's a fascinating thing to consider.
Okay.
What's being called the enrollment cliff. The enrollment cliff. That sounds ominous.
It does, a little bit, but what it refers to is the declining birth rates in many Western countries.
Okay.
So basically, there are going to be fewer domestic students in the coming years, which could lead to a shortage of students in their universities.
So if there are fewer domestic students, does that mean more opportunities for international students?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Some experts believe that after 2025, these countries might actually need to attract more international students to fill those spots.
To keep things going.
Yeah, and keep their universities thriving.
So it's like a silver lining.
It could be.
A potential shift could actually benefit international students.
Exactly. It really shows how important it is to stay informed, be adaptable, and think long term.
Yeah.
This landscape is constantly changing.
Right.
What looks like a challenge today could be an opportunity tomorrow.
That is encouraging.
Yeah.
But we can't ignore the elephant in the room, right?
Yeah.
This issue of rising hate crimes and racism against Indians in some of these Western countries.
It's a real concern.
Yeah. Our sources mention some disturbing trends like online hate speech, even demands for a white Canada.
It's a valid concern and something our listeners should definitely be aware of.
Yeah.
You know, you need to understand the realities of the places you're considering. So research not just the academic institutions, but also the social and cultural climate.
So how can they assess that? What are some red flags they should be looking out for?
Pay attention to news reports, social media discussions, even online forums where students share their experiences. Look for patterns, recurring themes. Are there frequent incidents of discrimination? Are there support systems in place for international students who might face these issues?
Yeah, so don't be afraid to ask the tough questions.
Exactly.
Gather as much info as you can.
Yeah, and it's not just about being aware of those risks, right? It's also about personal responsibility.
We all have a role to play in creating a more inclusive and welcoming environment.
So be mindful of your actions, your words.
Exactly.
How you represent yourself and your culture abroad.
Yeah, challenge stereotypes when you see them. Promote understanding.
Yeah.
Advocate for inclusivity.
So it's a two-way street.
It is.
Be aware of the challenges, but also be proactive in creating positive change.
Exactly. It's about being informed, prepared, and resilient.
Okay. So we've covered a lot.
Yeah.
Choosing the right skills, researching destinations, exploring those new options, even addressing that elephant in the room.
It's a lot to consider.
It is. What's the key takeaway for our listener who's maybe feeling a little overwhelmed by all this?
I'd say the key is to approach this journey with a balanced perspective.
Okay.
Acknowledge the challenges, but don't let them overshadow the incredible opportunities that still exist out there.
So it's like you're saying, navigating this world of studying abroad.
It's kind of like trekking through, I don't know, like unfamiliar terrain.
It is, yeah.
You need a map, you need a compass.
Right, but with the right preparation and the right mindset, you can definitely find your path.
So we've talked about, this shifting landscape, all these challenges, some exciting new opportunities emerging.
Right.
What are the key takeaways here? Like, what should our listener really remember as they're kind of starting on this journey?
I think the most important thing is to focus on acquiring those skills that are in high demand globally.
So even if certain doors are closing, having the right skills can open new ones.
Exactly. If you equip yourself with skills that are relevant across borders,
Yeah,
you're going to be in a much stronger position.
that makes a lot of sense. What else should our listener keep in mind?
Do your research really thoroughly. It's not just about choosing a country or a university.
All right.
It's about understanding, those nuances of immigration policies, the job market, the social and cultural environment.
So be informed, be prepared.
Yeah, don't just follow the crowd.
Forge your own path.
Exactly.
Okay, and don't be afraid to, like you were saying, think beyond those traditional destinations.
Right. The world is full of opportunities.
Yeah.
Sometimes venturing off that beaten path can lead to the most rewarding experiences.
You've given our listeners a lot to think about.
I hope so.
Any final words of wisdom before we wrap up this deep dive?
I would just say, remember that studying abroad,
Yeah.
it's more than just getting a degree, right?
Okay.
It's a transformative experience. You can really broaden your horizons, challenge your assumptions, shape your future in ways you never imagined.
It's about personal growth, pushing yourself outside that comfort zone.
Exactly.
Embracing the unknown.
Exactly.
Well said. So for our listeners out there,
Yeah.
stay curious, stay adaptable, never stop learning.
Keep learning.
And with that, we've reached the end of our deep dive.
Well, this has been fun.
Yeah, this was great.
Thanks for having me.
We hope you found this exploration insightful, empowering.
Yes, absolutely.
We wish you all the best on your study abroad journey.
Good luck.
Until next time, keep diving deep.
Cheers.